Welcome back to another episode of Dev in the Details, the podcast where we go deep into AI and what it's like building a new startup in San Francisco. Today, I want to welcome Sami Ghoche. He was founder and CEO of Forethought, an AI customer service startup with massive customers like UPS, Scale AI, Grammarly, and Superhuman, many others, processing over 1 billion AI interactions a month. Forethought won the TechCrunch Disrupt Award, which if you watch Silicon Valley, you know it's no small feat. Involves absolutely crushing a record-setting Wiseman score.
That's right.
And Forethought was just acquired, I think announced last month by Zendesk,
Yes.
the leader in customer service. And it was the largest acquisition I saw in a report in the 20-year-old company's history. Before building Forethought for the past 7 years, Sami was a machine learning lead at LinkedIn, graduated with his undergrad and master's from Harvard. And he also happens to be one of my best friends. Now, Sami is going to be, I think the official title is Czar of AI at Zendesk, right? And so, Sami, welcome to the show. Excited to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you, Dev.
Awesome.
It's not officially Czar of AI, although that is nicer. It's technically VP of Applied AI.
Yeah.
I think I should probably talk to somebody. That sounds
Sounds like you're going to define what that actually means.
Yes.
Sami, tell me about the genesis of Forethought. I kind of remember it in the very early days. And obviously, you guys got off to quite a quick start out of the gate with TechCrunch Disrupt. But if you thought about like the very beginning, what was the observation that led to it? Did you always know that you wanted to do AI for customer support? How did you get started?
Yeah, good question. You didn't mention, but at the time we were roommates. I think
We were.
one other roommate, and you used to see me collapse on the couch back then.
I used to see that you had alarms set every single night at like 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. because you'd be sleeping on the couch until you had to wake up to essentially keep building the startup. Like I think you invented 996 before it became AI mainstream.
I didn't invent anything. It was a rough time, but no, it changed. In retrospect, a lot of the things I was doing were not the most productive things, but you learn. No, we didn't really. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't as passionate about AI for customer service, like specifically. I was pretty passionate about the tech. The tech at the time, you had these papers coming out about attention and sort of neural networks with attention. Eventually, there was this paper called Transformers that came out, which is like the T in GPT. So my co-founder Dion and I at the time just thought this is going to change how enterprises and businesses operate, and how work gets done. And
Wait, actually walk me through that. You see a paper about Transformers and you're like, this is what's going to change how business gets done. Like what did you see to know that? And by the way, I remember a very specific moment where you pointed me to the BERT paper. And I think that was probably the attention is all you need paper. And you essentially were like, this model, you have got to go try it out. But what did you see in BERT? Because I feel like nobody really was onto the tech until 5 years later. What did you see like in that technology that made you think enterprises are going to change the way they work?
It was a little bit before BERT actually. And it was kind of a like progression of a lot of papers coming out from like Salesforce at the time, Richard Socher, etc. And Dion and I would just build these prototypes on the side, and we had this Oprah demo, as we called it, which it was kind of a question answering thing. You would ask it a question, give it some context, and it would the key thing there was that it would underline the piece that mattered, and sort of give you a confidence score. And we thought, okay, this is different. Now it's kind of child's play. You can actually generate all these things, but back then we thought enterprise search was this thing that a lot of companies had tried to do and sort of never succeeded at, like the Google for the enterprise. And we thought part of that was the models weren't there, and the utility of just like showing blue links was not amazing. It was kind of a leap of faith. Did we imagine that what has happened now would have happened? No, but we weren't the only ones in the space at all. It's kind of a bunch of companies. Most of them are dead. It's a typical cycle.
Bunch of companies, most of them dead, but you guys got out of the cage pretty fast. You won TechCrunch Disrupt, which I think is like one of the best nerd conferences in San Francisco for new startup builders. Why? Like, I think about enterprise search as a problem that every year. It's funny. I pitched enterprise search actually to one of the partners at Greylock, and I remember he like in 2016 he's like, "Yeah, I just don't know if anyone wakes up and they're like, I have an enterprise search problem." Like, you took this problem statement people have been thinking about for a while, a new model, agree, cool, but how did you actually ended up translating that into
Yeah.
TechCrunch that's dropped in early traction?
I mean, of course, Glean has made that pretty successful.
Right.
But no, we thought that it's hard to monetize these things, and kudos to them. I'm not sure how they pulled it off, but um, at the time we were using Slack at LinkedIn and at Forethought. Um, Slack is super valuable. The company essentially runs on Slack, but we still paid $7 per user per month. So we thought it's important to be closer to the end value and not have to either charge very little or just really struggle with communicating the ROI. So um, customer experience, customer service made a ton of sense because things were rooted in the cost of manual labor.
Hmm.
And so you had baked in ROI there. And it was a pretty repetitive set of problems that just kept coming back and back. And at the time, you didn't have the zero shot general language models to work with. So you kind of had to take, however advanced the models were at the time, you still needed to train them on
Yeah.
data. So if you had the same problem come up again and again, that's a great data set. And you had the ROI justification. So we just rationalized to ourselves, this is the space. And we jumped in and we kind of didn't know much at all. And that, bit us in the butt for probably 2 years at
It also
least.
probably helped. I feel like if you knew everything that you know now, I don't know if you would have started the company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it all worked out. So I would say yes. But if you'd asked me in the middle there, I'm not so sure.
Tell me about that middle, and specifically, I'm thinking about you started this company on like these transformer models you had to train or like tune on any of the incoming data sets, and then you probably like when did you first see the first general pre-trained transformer GPT demo, and what did you think it would mean for your business? Like, tell me about that first moment, maybe in 22, when you actually started to go from what
Yeah.
you're were building your
Um,
company onto the new stack.
Yeah, so we saw GPT-2 come out before that. That was a big change. It still wasn't like the most usable thing. We were using it in very limited, sort of low stakes situations where we were auto completing things for human agents kind of behind the firewall. That was cool. It wasn't really the game changer moment yet. If you remember, you and I used to go to these AI meetups and organized by like OpenAI folks, and sort of GPT 3.5 instruct whatever before ChatGPT came out. That seemed like the moment that things change. I remember you'd go back at night and start to play with it, and we were trying to see like could we use an API for these things, and we thought at that moment things would kind of change.
Yeah.
I would say it really changed after GPT-4. Once GPT-4 came out, it accelerated the timeline. We thought, these things might take a few years before they're really capable of reasoning and not making mistakes and following instructions well. But it turned out to be faster. And yeah, we started to be a little, or allow ourselves to be a little bolder with where the space itself could go, and try to claim that we can play a part in that.
Sometimes one of the hard parts is like ripping out all the infrastructure you built out for some number of years and basically being like, hey, we're going on a totally new
Yeah.
way. And even if it's in kind of the same realm. So at Predabase, we helped people build, train, deploy deep learning models. And then LLMs came onto the stage. And you could say LLMs are just an extension of deep learning models, but really it was like a full infrastructure
Yeah.
rewrite, a new product. Like, how was that decision for you? Was it obvious? Like, okay, we're going to throw away all the models we've trained and we're
Yeah.
just going to start using this GPT-4 API? Or
Yeah.
was that like an internal debate?
Here's how we did it. So ChatGPT comes out. Obviously, a huge buzz around that. So we immediately start to play defense. I think for about 2 weeks. No, this is the same models that we're using. It just has a chat interface. Yeah, we have this too. It's very cool, but it's not. We're just as relevant. Nothing's changed. And while there's a lot of truth to that like did not matter at all. So we learned that pretty quickly. So a couple of weeks later, we were rebranding. We trademarked this thing we called Support GPT.
Hmm.
Yeah, we leaned all into it. We too are Chat GPT. and you had to do that. That was the trend. That was the wave. It was too hard to fight against. Um, I think we were relatively small, just over 100 people at the company, and we tried to have everybody be close to the customers. I would say on back then we had these more like ML science teams. Those were potentially the teams that were least close to customers, and it actually what would have been an issue. I was really conscious of like, let's not be attached to whatever we've built. Personally, like, my time was like spent meeting with customers, hearing about the issues, and not caring about the underlying stack. But there are folks on the team who that was kind of the main thing they worked on for a couple of years. Some of them embraced the change, and we're so excited about like having way more powers now and having more of an impact. And some others didn't really, and over time, some of them left. Some others we sort of agreed to have them leave.
Have you seen this like article that I think Sequoia emailed out about being a heat-seeking missile for pain? It's like one of their founders basically said like some of the best people that you're going to work with early are going to be heat-seeking missiles for pain because they're going to want to do the very painful things that actually like add a lot of leverage. Like say everything we've written for the last 3 years is being deleted and we're going to go a different way as an example. There's a lot of hype around, I think, AI adoption today, and especially agents. But in general, I feel like when it comes to the vertical applications, there's like 3 or 4 markets that have gotten pull here, right? Like definitely the leader is coding agents. We had a few people over the last couple of weeks come in and talk about like where coding agents is going. We've had someone from Cursor, someone from Endor, and others. The second market, I think, is legal. You see like Harvey, you see Legora, and these other companies are like really picking up. You could maybe argue medical with scribes and like open evidence is like doing well, but I feel like open evidence is dominating that market. I don't know if there's many different players. There probably is. But then support. I think support probably comes in somewhere in like the top 2 or 3 for like use cases where AI has started to get the maximum penetration. What made customer service and support like a uniquely good opportunity for this like first round of AI disruption?
I think many things. I think that ROI piece is a big one. The fact that things are kind of repetitive and a little bit transactional. In the best case, they're not, and you can maintain kind of long-term memory about a customer and personalize the experience. But if you don't have that, it's not a deal breaker. And so each situation is kind of its own self-contained thing. The context there is enough that it can fit in these context windows. And like I said, the ROI is there, and it's a massive TAM. Pretty much almost every single company, once it reaches a certain scale, has that problem.
Yeah.
So the workflows have been standardized in large part because of companies like Zendesk, where you orient things around a ticketing system or tickets or conversations, and you then escalate and you handle them. And so the data models were also kind of standardized, and you could work off of that. Forethought couldn't have existed if every single company was doing its own thing for service.
Yeah, I feel like this is a huge thing. It's like writing off existing integrations and like surface area you can jump onto. One big thing that I think, do you remember in 2024, like you were making the transition to GPT-4, I think at that point in the company. And one of the biggest things in like the VC investment landscape are like, oh, are all these companies just GPT-4 wrappers? Like I haven't heard that as recently. Like people, I don't think as much talk about like Claude wrappers or others. Mm-hmm. But in 2024, there was a question of like, is this company just a GPT-4 wrapper? And I remember at one point you're like, hey, like, if you're being super aggressive about the definition, I'm probably a GPT-4 wrapper too. Do you think that's a correct criticism of some of the vertical SaaS and AI companies that they're just GPT-4 wrappers? Or like, which side of the market do you think is going to be correct on that one? Which is like things get commoditized versus not?
Well, I'm biased, but I feel like that's
a GPT-4 wrapper.
Yeah. I think it's been proven that's not the case for if you just say like vertical SaaS. That's not a GPT-4 wrapper unless you're like doing something.
Well, actually, I think that it goes both ways. Like now, people aren't saying GPT-4 wrapper, but they're like foundational labs are just going to go crush every market, right? So like coding now, it used to be like GitHub Copilot went crazy a while back, and then it became obviously Cursor. Then Claude Code started to go into it. So I think people are now questioning, instead of GPT-4 wrapper, does that value just accrue towards the lab? It's like the same kind of argument, but I feel like just a different form factor.
Yeah. We'll see how things change. My opinion on that is that coding is a pretty foundational thing too. But like knowing what to code is not. It requires expertise in a domain, and let alone distribution, which is a huge thing. So no, I don't really like lose sleep over are you just a GPT wrapper? Can somebody also use GPT and do everything? Yeah, but there were a lot of like startups. If you looked at the YC batches back then, many of them felt like rappers, and it was more like eval on this one thing, and like yeah, that's probably going to be, if it isn't already, in the realm of foundational work. But solving a business problem for a whole department and like customer revenue and all of that and distributing it, that's not going to be solved like that, I don't think.
Let me ask a question where I'm not sure if there's a good answer, but like customer service and support is a very competitive market. I think you mentioned when you started the company, there are many startups and like they've since died. Now there are also many startups that have all attacked the space. Yeah, more startups, more well-funded startups that I think exist out there. We see a lot of their brand names as they kind of, I think, raised big rounds. How do you differentiate, like, what's the winning company going to look like? And I think about this in every space. I'm like, all right, if like the core IP in these companies 7 years ago used to be like their models or their data that they were tuning on, like now most of these models are something everyone has access to. And I think about this in customer service. I think about this for legal tech companies. Like, where is the enduring value actually going to get built? Is there enduring value to be built in one of these vertical SaaS app companies?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So one, I think for any company, my opinion is you have to build a good product and build a good distribution, and it doesn't matter what tools you have access to. Everybody had AWS, available, but you could still, mess it up. So same thing. I mean, Forethought used to not execute as well, even though we had the same models. Then we like made some changes and we became a lot better. So that's like one. Second, I mean, we picked one message for how we positioned ourselves and differentiated, and we kind of did that at the expense of all the other messages. So we were leaving stuff on the table, but you kind of got to pick one, and hopefully it is different. And a lot of people will not care about that, but for the ones that do care, you're the only one singing this tune. Like they're going to go towards you, and then you go from there. So for us, that was learning from your historical conversations. So instead of starting from scratch and let's go build AI agents one at a time, which is kind of a problem that other folks don't talk about. They talk about like, here's what we can do at runtime, but not as much focus on how do we set it up in the first place to get there. That was our focus. We'll learn from the conversations, we'll ingest your data, and we'll automatically generate these agents. I think that's part of the story with the Zendesk acquisition, is that Zendesk has all this data, has all the workflows, and there's a strong story there. If you wanted to compete with that full stack and you don't have that data, you don't have anything on day one, you can go like do some asymmetric thing and talk about something else that you have, but not this piece.
Where do you think it goes? Like, and what I mean by that specifically is we started off in customer support for, AI agents for customer support. I see some companies that are going to go super deep in this, but then do you think that there's also just going to be companies that say what we've built is a really good way to replicate AI agents on an arbitrary data source? So we start with customer support, and then we're going to go into sales, and then we're going to go into ops. Like, if I had to guess, my guess is like Sierra is probably taking a little bit of this approach, right? Like Sierra in its customer pitch decks, my guess is probably saying we're an AI customer support company, but it's an investor decks. It's going to be like we're an agentic work company for like each of the different domains. Did you guys ever think about something like that? Like, hey, do we want to tackle other workthose outside of customer support? And how'd you decide what to do?
Yeah,
where do you think it's going to head? Yeah.
We thought about it a ton, and I can't speak to Sierra. Obviously, they're doing very well. I think where we landed as a startup, that we were relying a lot on inbound and SEO, and we don't have the brand name of a Zendesk. So like we want people to find us if they're looking for customer service, which is usually, as you said, like one of the main things people look for. But once they find us, we want to convey the message that we can do a lot more than just that. So our tagline was AI agents for every customer moment.
Hmm.
I like to say like every customer moment from customer acquisition, which is a pre-sales thing, to onboarding, retention, upselling, etc. Currently, those like functions are handled by different departments in a company.
Hmm.
That's just like how the org charts are. That if you were designing things now, I think it may look pretty different, and definitely I think in a few years it would look different. You shouldn't have, just to like trivialize it a bit, like a chatbot for support and a chatbot for marketing and a chatbot for billing, and when let's have the customer go pick the right one to go to, and if they're talking in one place, let's say they have a support issue, too bad if sales knew about that and maybe they positioned something to sell to them.
Hmm.
Too bad they're not in the room, they don't know. So I think having a unified interface for customer things is going to be the future.
Hmm.
And so in the meantime, support is kind of the first place that everybody's focused on for a lot of good reason.
Hmm.
And that workflow has existed, and so you can learn from that data and kind of replicate it with AI agents. But there's a lot of use cases where it just wasn't economical to service those kinds of things. But now you can do that with AI and do that in that unified interface. So
Yeah.
I think customer things is one thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's other things, employee service, HR, IT, finance. I think that's separate. And I think it's probably useful and necessary to like focus on, the one. And one is not just service, like customer support, but all customer things in my mind.
I think I picked up on that being your tagline when I saw a billboard for Forethought on the 101. And that's
Nice.
always like a really funny moment is like driving home from like a commute and then seeing your friend's company has like a billboard on the 101.
Very
And I can
nice.
only imagine like the boardroom conversations about like you need to go spend more on marketing or something along those lines that actually led to that.
That was self-imposed. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
glad you saw that. That's cool.
um, Simi, I feel like there's three big like moments in AI over the last 7 to 10 years. I think like the first moment was these pre-trained transformers. 2017, very few people I think actually were thinking about them, but it was like really cool for probably like YouTube and Google and a few other companies, Uber, and then like these tech startups that were making a name. Then it was like 2022, 23, where you had like these instruction trained larger models that actually felt like they were generative in nature and could do things. And I think that's when you probably pivoted the company maybe to like being GPT-4. And then there's like today. And I feel like today, I don't know if you read that blog that like something big is happening, like, article, thought piece that went out viral. But it was basically someone who got access to like Claude Code
Mm.
and just started to use it. And they kind of had that light bulb moment essentially where they were like, I haven't written code in months. Most of the best engineers out here haven't written code in months. They're just like orchestrating or reviewing. And it's really hard to use that tech and not feel like this is a new shift. Even though the code, like the models were good before, something totally different is coming up like here too. What's your view on like everything that's happened, especially if you just think about the last like 4 to 6 months when it comes towards agents and like agentic
Mhm.
AI? Have you become AI pilled in what they're able to do? Or are you more
Yeah, yeah.
sober? Yeah.
Oh no, I was always optimistic about what AI can do. I think maybe my like take on this in fewest words possible is it used to be that you could try to rely on AI agents following instructions, you would hope reliably to achieve one thing. And I think now what's more possible is you can have the higher level work
Hmm.
be done by AI and kind of absorb more context, business context, and try things and keep doing it and actually iterate until you get a good outcome, which one of those outcomes could be actually designing
Hmm.
another AI agents that is like doing the repetitive work as an example. So we used to talk about AI is not going to replace jobs, etc. I do fundamentally believe that, but the talk track
Wait,
is
you fundamentally believe AI will not replace jobs?
I will replace a lot of jobs, but on net it will create jobs. I'm
More employment in general, but there'll be job displacement. Like people will go
absolutely
move. Yeah.
a ton of displacement. Yeah, I think, and probably more quickly than ever before. I'm not an expert at previous iterations of this, but yes, it seems like that's happened already in support to some extent. You look at the like amount of new hiring in support, I think it's dropped about 80%.
Yeah.
from a few years ago. That's an example. But yeah, we we would talk about people will just do the higher level work,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what AI now is doing that it wasn't doing before.
So I sold my startup before I feel like these agent harnesses and coding harnesses like came out into market. So I didn't get a chance to see what it looked like in a really small team. But you hear all this talk about like there's going to be a one-person unicorn company because all the things, it's going to be one person, 200 agents
That
doing it
happened.
all.
Yeah,
What?
I think I saw that
I
happened.
saw Sam Altman say something like he can't share the details, but he thinks it's already happened.
No, it's like public. I forget the name.
Oh, it's public. Okay.
Some guy and his brother.
Um, what changed internally for you guys and when did it change? Like as you were building as a AI native startup here in San Francisco, like what changed? What did you see change once these agents actually came in? Were you all of a sudden a two-person team building what thousands would have done before? Like what was the reality on actually using these agents internally?
Yeah, I mean, we're a lot more productive now than we were 2 years
Do
ago.
you guys do anything to measure that? Like how do you know? What's the vibe
Um,
check on that?
yeah, we don't really have a measurement for that, and we could talk about lines of code, but like AI can generate all the lines immediately, so that's not super useful. I think we just know that we're shipping a lot more features
Mhm.
um, within the same period of time. But we just feel that it's like undeniable. How much? I'm not sure. It's at least a 2x.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if not more. I think some of our engineers have embraced it more. I think everybody will over time.
Was it just product and engineering velocity, or did AI make the rest of the business better in some way? Like, were these agents helpful?
So we use Forethought for Forethought, but more on the customer service side.
Hmm.
But outside of that, to be honest, we haven't like seen massive effects at
That's
all.
what I think too. I'm
Yeah.
surprised I haven't. I think like sales is starting in some ways, like especially like the SDR. Man, imagine being an SDR today.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like an SDR has to become just an agent manager because I can't imagine them doing their old version of the job. But I haven't seen as much penetration in these other verticals.
Personally, I have not. You hear about a lot of stories, but yeah, I'm a little more skeptical on those areas.
Yeah. You said the phrase like good outcomes earlier, and I was gonna go take advantage of that moment at the time to just go transition and say you had a great outcome, I think that got announced in the last month, which is that Forethought was just acquired by Zendesk. And having gone through the M&A process, I know it's like crazy. But I'm curious to just hear about it from your standpoint. I think before you were going into it, I was like, by the way, just so you know, like M&As are crazy. Like it's very intense.
That
Um,
mention.
were you surprised? Were you kind of like, did it match up to expectations? What was it like going through, a
Yeah,
decent sized acquisition?
yeah. I mean, it was busy, and I this is one of one for me, so I don't know how this compares to others, but it felt like we went into every little legal detail of every single thing that we did from even 7 years ago. It's pretty actually
Did you have
eye-opening.
that moment when you're like, oh man, I accidentally didn't have an employee sign a PIA when they changed states in the new state? I've sunk my entire company. Like there was just so
Oh,
many things where it's like,
yeah,
how bad is this? I have no idea.
not that specific one, but yeah, you're like, oh well, this thing that I didn't think mattered at all is now like coming back up here. Is this going to derail stuff? And so you get a little paranoid, but apparently that's quite common, and it's pretty hard for things that your intuition tends to line up well. Like if you think that something doesn't actually matter, it might involve a lot of legal cycles, but it will get resolved.
Hmm.
But it's annoying in the moment for sure.
What did the early like? What I mean, M&A can be a long process. Sometimes it can be a short process. What did you feel like your experience was like when? What were the most stressful parts of it? Was it negotiating? Was it due diligence? Like, what was the hard part?
Yeah, I think once you're negotiating and you're talking about signing an LOI and you start to talk about prices, um, you really think about that very hard, because once you sign that LOI, it's very hard to turn back if the deal falls through for whatever reason. And then later you want to still be a company that's growing fast, and you need to raise money eventually. And you have to say that you had this LOI and here was the price and all that. It just makes it harder for a VC that's trying to do the 10x to say yes, I will fund you at whatever price because I knew that you were willing to sell today at that price.
It's one of those few like one-way doors in life, it sounds
Yeah,
like. Yeah.
yeah, and so you gotta like trust that the team that wants to buy you, you can trust them, that they understand their space, the value prop from this acquisition makes sense to both, and that if anything gets derailed for whatever reason, during diligence, that's not going to blow up the deal, because that would be worse than not having done anything at all.
Yeah. My gosh. And what did closing feel like? How did you go celebrate with your team once you knew it was actually all going to happen? Share
For
the
Sami
details.
we so Forethought, about a quarter of us were in San Francisco, but otherwise Toronto, New York, Austin, LA, and so we flew everybody over in true Forethought fashion. We went out to karaoke. We had a pretty big party. We had folks from Zendesk there also, and had a bunch of dinners. Had some
Awesome.
fireside chats at Zendesk. The whole thing kind of spanned a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Still
That's
ongoing. I mean, karaoke last night with the Zendesk team. I imagine the celebrations. Maybe this is it now.
Yeah, I feel like a few weeks sounds about right for what you got. One of the things you said is like it's one of one, right? I think this is for acquisitions that you've been through. This is probably pretty true for the vast majority of founders that ever go through an acquisition. Obviously, they're serial founders and they exist and they do incredibly well. But most people, if they have an outcome, it's only a one-time thing. That actually is a really challenging piece because it's such a big moment that you have in your life that you don't really get to practice for. Like I probably screwed up 100+ customer deals before we signed our first one. Like I've talked to 100 customers at least before we signed our first one. Can't exactly go through like 100 LOIs as an example before you sign your first one. What was your biggest learning or like advice that you'd give to other founders if they're thinking about acquisitions coming up?
Thinking about acquisitions, I think it's the thing I was talking about there. Just make sure that you understand the deal very well, and that it makes sense to you, and this is not just like at the largesse of the company, and if something happens like a war in the Middle East, or something else,
That would never happen.
apocalypse, yeah, that
Yeah.
that like that would derail it. Really convince yourself of that, and like know the people that you're going to be working with, and trust them, because you're kind of at their mercy.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
I want to switch gears from things that I think you've done just into like a little bit of like personal reflections and wrap ups. You had, I think, a very intensive like startup journey from those early days when I remember you were just like falling asleep on the couch building Forethought to probably a month ago when you were falling asleep on the couch building Forethought. What were like the top 2 or 3 hardest learnings that you feel like you did and or learned from the startup building journey? Like things you felt like you didn't know before weren't obvious, or maybe they
Yeah.
even were obvious, but you didn't really understand them until you actually did the thing.
Yeah, no, they weren't obvious. I'll give you just one. I think kind of the VC model, VC game, like early on, if you have traction, like you'll get these valuations that kind of don't make sense. But as soon as you slip up, they're kind of not coming back.
Mm.
Hopefully you don't slip up, but if you do, they're not coming back, and it's very hard to recapture momentum. So you don't want to get too far ahead of your skis, and that was just the norm around 2021 when we were doing our Series C at the time.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the companies that have died was because of that, and I mean that was a big challenge. So understanding the incentives. You have your company. This is what you're doing. You're gonna like do it till the end,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing you have. VCs have a lot of investments, and they're in the power law game, and you would like to get achieve a power law outcome, but you don't want it to be power law or bust.
Yeah.
And often that's kind of how the incentives um, you know structure things.
Other than the fundraising cycle, let's imagine you were going to do your next company one day.
Mhm.
What would you do differently about the next company that you basically got as a learning from Forethought? I remember a couple of things. The first is, I think on your recommendation, I got Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. I emailed it to all of my founders and the board, and I think this was like 2022, and I was like, we have to Amp It Up. So that was, I remember, one of your favorite books. We also, everyone at Predabase knows one quote, which is, nothing takes longer than a week. And this came off a very nonchalant conversation you and I had, where I was like, yeah, we're doing roadmap planning. And I think you said something like, roadmap planning? Like, how long are you roadmap planning for? And I remember at the time you were doing multi-quarter roadmap planning. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing multi-quarters? I was like, well, some projects have to be a long period of time. And you just said, I think nonchalantly, nothing takes longer than a week. And I actually really like that. And we actually, we use that as one of our informal, unofficial values. What would you take as, like, let's just say these company building, not related to like financing and rounds, but company building, team building things for your next company?
So I don't think you want to be myopic about where things are going in the future, but like you're already in this, you're living this, you're paranoid about the future, you're thinking about that anyway. Like you don't want the exercise of planning a roadmap to actually mean that like now we've planted these goalposts and we can't change it anymore, and that this is what we did because planning was so expensive. God forbid we go plan again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing. No, I mean, moving fast is the only thing that a startup has as an advantage. You don't have the resources, like the people. You have a way smaller team. You don't have the customers, but you can have that DNA. You can move fast. You don't have the dependencies between people. So, I mean, stay lean for as long as you can, as much as you can, and forever, really. And yeah, I mean, move fast, compress the cycle, especially on like the turnaround for the next thing. You use
How do
the
you contrast that stay lean message with a lot of the investment advice that you might get, which is the market opportunity is so big that you have to go build ahead and sell ahead for everything you're doing? You're in customer support AI, like, and we know the market's going to be big here. There's 10 other competitors. You need to raise that big round now, higher up, ahead of like where the product might be, so you can do the land grab. How do you that's the other side of what a founder is going to be hearing.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that, but it's kind of an excuse if you feel like you have to hire so many more people, more than like what you currently need. Like if you're not drowning in things, you shouldn't be hiring. If you're drowning, which you should be manufacturing the fact that you're drowning. Yes, go and hire, but not to go fund things that defocus you either. So that's where you have to kind of apply your judgment on like what is the core thing, and are these other things very important for building out a platform or having long term defensibility, or is it just like here's another revenue lever, here's another one, here's another one? That typically is I think is not as great. And if you can be the best at the one thing, that's better. And typically, having thousands of engineers working on one thing means you end up with not only a much more expensive team, but like much worse outcomes. Even though every single person might be very smart, they have to coordinate. You get stuck. It's much worse. I think on the go-to-market side, if things are really working, and this is where some of the 2021 stuff was not that great, like the burn profiles of a lot of startups were not fundamentally sound.
Yeah.
But yet, if the growth was like 3x or whatever, great. This is a very valuable company. We're going to pour fuel on the fire. That's wrong. But if that's working, it may still be a risk to say we're going to 3x the team and see what happens. But, that can make some sense. But if the foundation's not working, don't touch it.
What's a good way that the founder should know at a growth stage if it's working or not? Is it like burn multiple? Do you look at LTV to CAC? Like, what do you think is the best? Like, if there's something that a growth stage founder was going to look at, what do you think that should be?
I mean, all of it. It has to be. It's like a symphony, and usually you like fix this thing, and it's like whack-a-mole. By fixing this one, you get another one that pops up.
Yeah, but you have to focus. Like, give me the top 2 or 3 that you thought a lot about.
I mean, ultimately, what makes a company valuable is cash flow.
Yeah.
And so thinking at least about how you might get to cash flow in the future.
Thing for an AI native startup to say, but yes.
Yeah. Well, there, a lot of them are dealing with very big numbers and at least painting stories of future cash flow, and that's fine. But if let's say your sales team for the like incremental deal costs more than what that deal is. They have to fund not only themselves but the rest of the company eventually. So that's a broken
Where
business.
do you think the margin profile for these AI infrastructure companies is going to go over 3 to 5 years? Because I think to your point, I don't know if you hear lots of different claims around the gross margins, but I think what you typically hear is that these companies are supply constrained, not demand constrained. So
Mhm.
you'd think that they're able to charge high prices. But at the same time, what you often hear is like companies are operating at close to zero gross margins
Mhm.
because they're trying to do land grab. What do you
Yep.
think happens in 3 to 5 years? Is like, are there defensible margins? Should we expect AI has SaaS-like margins, or is that a pipe dream?
I would expect yes, but I'm not an expert at this. This starts to get into like the power grid and compute, and there's a lot of potentially unforeseen things that could change all of this. If there's a new model architecture and it doesn't consume this much power and it's a totally different set of chips,
Yeah,
all of this gets upended. So, but if it stays like this, I think yes, there will be pretty decent margins,
awesome.
like pretty much like SaaS.
Good for all of us then. I'm going to ask you two last questions, and if you want, also you'd have the opportunity to turn it around on me. But first question I want to ask you is, what's a non-consensus view you have when it comes to AI? In 2017, I got asked by one of our investors, what do I think is the most underrated space in AI? And in 2017, it already felt like things were overrated, but I said like data labeling and data infrastructure. So I pitched Scale AI like as like the thing that would be important. But now
Definitely.
in 2026, it's actually much harder to say. But what's your non-consensus view when it comes towards something in AI?
Uh, not sorry, as an investment opportunity or
No,
just
it could
as a
just be like a
space.
view on where things are. You could say everyone
Yeah,
is worried about the
yeah,
doomsday and I'm not, or it could be
yeah,
just a
yeah.
non-consensus view.
So I think fundamentally these AI models, like, they could do more now. They could do this higher level work, all of that, but they're still like uh, predicting the next token in a generic way.
Hmm.
And so they're trained on lots of data, and they're like maximizing the probability that the next thing they say is not wrong, and some of it is from pattern matching and learning from the past. The world that is like possible because of these models is just very different now, and so a lot of the innovations from like how AI can be used to do more useful things, I don't think any of them are coming from AI. It's like people, thinking about their context and that they have business context, other things, and guiding the models to like getting to those outcomes. And so, because of all the uncertainty that everybody's feeling now and all the rapid pace of change brought about by AI, ironically, it's probably an environment where these types of models are not like the best at designing the solutions of the future.
Hmm.
That
So
makes
you
sense.
think humans are still going to be the primary drivers for future solution design, but they're just going to think of possibilities that we can't quite imagine today?
Yeah, even more so now. Yeah, you need the human's intelligence and context.
Yeah, I'm excited about that future. Last question. And I got asked this a lot, but what is your post-acquisition splurge purchase? What are you going to get yourself to try and
uh, I like nice clothes, as you know.
I'm familiar.
So I got some things. I'll get some more things. Maybe a watch.
Okay.
Um, yeah, a
Yeah,
nice watch.
pretty classic. Yeah, we got to ask you at some point what's the wardrobe that you're wearing right now. But perfect. Sami, thank you so much for joining this episode
Thank you.
for Having the Details. It was a ton of fun. I think seeing you build the company day in, day out, from when you started all the way to where you are now. Excited to see what happens next too at Zendesk. I think as you kind of take on the title of Chief AI Czar. But continuing on from there, love to have you overall. Thanks for everyone who I think was able to listen throughout the episode as well. And until next time, for our next episode of Devin the Details, if there's anyone that you'd like to be able to see on the show, please drop us a comment. Thank you very much.
Yeah.